We have brought together an incredible guest this evening, Mark Cushing. For those of you who do not know who Mark is an attorney. He is also the founder of the Animal Policy Group. It is a lobbying group within the industry itself. He has been incredibly instrumental in many initiatives within this profession, of which we will probably touch on quite a few as we go through this. But tonight's conversation is all about what's happening in veterinary practices. We are seeing a shortage, or some of us are seeing a shortage of both veterinarians and technicians, and we keep asking, what can we do? And so tonight, Mark is going to help outline many of those solutions for us. But if you've been to a bridge club before, or if you have not, a couple things to note. You can actually pin Mark's photo. If you go up to the upper right-hand corner, you'll see 3 little dots. You can actually pin, so he always remains on your screen as we are going through and more people come into the conversation. But we start and end every single bridge club with a toast. And so I am opening us up tonight because it is May 4th. And for those of you who know, I am a Star Wars fan. So we are going to quickly start with a small little quote from Yoda, because if challenges do exist, we must find a solution. But what Yoda says is do or do not. There is no try. So I raise a glass tonight for us to find real and sustainable solutions to our veterinary shortage. Cheers, everybody.
Cheers. Cheers.
You got to love a little Yoda.
That's a first.
Well, and I will tell you, had so much fun going through all the quotes for Star Wars today. It was awesome. Okay, so let's dive into this because we have a lot to discuss. Mark, I'm going to go ahead and we're going to start battering you with questions because this is a really big topic. But before we start with the first one, can you walk us through why you are one of the foremost authorities on this? I mean, your background is so enormous. I think that before we get started, why do we have you talking about this and not someone else?
Okay, I'm not going to call myself an authority. I've been called.
I will.
Let me tell you, Kathleen, I've been called a lot worse. So, trust me. I've been involved since 2005 in the industry, since 2007 full time, and it was not so much by accident. I just didn't know it would unfold this way. But I've had the privilege of representing the largest practice in the country, which, for some disqualifies me as an expert on anything, but it's been a privilege for me and represent the Mars veterinary practices, also represent Thrive, what used to be known as Pathways, Pet IQ, and other practices. So I've been close to a large number of veterinary practices. And I remember back in 2014 debating a topic now that just seems like a century ago, namely is there an overpopulation of vets? And one of the great things about the AVMA convention is they convene topics that are urgent and important and allow debates to happen and encourage them. And I debated 3 people, Paul Payan, Jim Wilson, and Dennis McKiernan, who were on the other side saying there was an overpopulation. And I believed in 2014 there was a shortage, which didn't make me unique. I think a lot of people may have thought that, but I got involved in this whole question of do we have enough? And part of it tied to starting new vet schools like Lincoln Memorial, or getting as a consultant for Ross when it was accredited, UNAM in Mexico City, and then later Arizona. So I swirled around this topic of do we have enough veterinarians? And honestly, we've never had enough in my time in the industry. And we'll talk about that tonight, but I write quite a bit on that topic and speak on it. And interestingly, was a keynote speaker for a group that has never invited me to do anything, which is HSUS Animal Care Expo 2 weeks ago in Orlando. And the topic was the shortage and its impact on shelters. And I hope tonight one of the topics we discuss is how much this issue impacts shelters and the least financially capable institutions of paying the salaries and recruiting veterinarians, and they face a real crisis too. So happy to dive in with any question. And I heard that Dr. Cheryl the Good might start off with the question.
I'll ask the first question. So, with the topic of the veterinary shortage, there still are some veterinarians who aren't don't believe in it,
Okay.
feel that there isn't a shortage. So we want to know, is there truly
Yeah.
a shortage? Can you
Great question.
tell us like 100%, is there a shortage?
And Cheryl, that's the question to start with. And let me make one thing clear. Are there some practices in the country that don't need more vets, that have all the vets they want? Yes. Are there possibly some communities in the country that are adequately staffed and no one has a problem getting an appointment? Possibly. I'm obviously not interviewed every practice, but if you picture what I do, I tend to be about 1,000 feet looking across the country. And I do a lot of work with Jim Lloyd. A lot of you know Jim, former dean of Florida, who has a dual degree of DVM as well as PhD in economics. And Jim and I talk often about these issues. And we both agree and put the number of the shortage right now from all the sources, including AVMA data, state VMA data, and other data that's out there, put the shortage right now in the range of 6,000 to 9,000 vets needed right now, and probably put the precise number pretty closer to 7,500. I know a practice very well that I represent that has 3 big practice groups inside of it, and they need 2,000 veterinarians. So if one practice, a national practice, needs 2,000, it's not hard for me to say that the shortage is in that dimension. And the challenge is with the pace of baby boomer veterinarians retiring, and by the color of my hair, I'm in that club of baby boomers. I'm not a veterinarian. The pace of retirement and the number that we produce annually, and thankfully the demand by millennials and Gen Zs for veterinary care for their pets, the pain of that number and the size of that number grows. And the data that Jim Lloyd put together nationally for Banfield Mars puts us in, at the end of this decade, at least a kind of a hardcore 15,000 veterinarian shortage. Now understand, human medicine, the American Association of Medical Colleges said in 2023, we're 135,000 doctors short. And that's just MDs. That doesn't count DOs. That doesn't count the 135,000 PAs and 325,000 nurse practitioners. So the point about shortage is once you're in a shortage posture, you rarely get out of it. And I don't foresee a time that we're not in some stage of a shortage. And if the next question, Cheryl, might be, how did we get here? It's not because we were foolish and weren't smart and couldn't understand the future. You never really know what the world looks like 20 years from now. But from 1979, after NC State and Mississippi State had opened their vet schools, from 79 to 2014, 35 years, pretty important 35 years in American history. Many of us have lived, our entire lives in that era. From 79 to 2014, 35 years, we opened one vet school. That was Western in Pomona. So again, I don't point a finger and say what a mistake that was to only open one. I don't think anybody proposed a second or a third or a fifth, but that's all we opened. And we ought not to be surprised when all of a sudden the combination of millennials, their ownership levels becoming the largest demographic group to own vets, to own pets. They don't own vets. They'd like to probably, but they don't. Gen Z's behind them, all because they were raised in baby boomer and Gen X families that had pets. And some of that was covered in my book, Pet Nation. We weren't prepared for the demand level that we have now. And then COVID hit, and it had the effect that it had, and we could debate that or talk about that, but it all added up to really a perfect storm. And we have a good problem. So many people have pets and they want pet healthcare, and they frankly want pet healthcare at the level that they get their own healthcare. So even expectations about what we want from a veterinarian change, certainly from my childhood. Vaccinations, your dog gets hurt, and then you put your pet down. There wasn't, it wasn't as complicated a system back in the 60s and so forth. That's not the case now. And that's a good problem to have, right? We have Blue Pearl hospitals in Midtown Manhattan with over 50 doctors. Who would have pictured, if you told me 20 years ago we'd have hospitals with 50 doctors, veterinary hospitals, I'd have said not a chance. And I would have certainly thought if there were, they would be at an academic institution, a teaching hospital. So That's where we are. So clearly we have a shortage. And if you don't believe me, you don't have to. Just go knock on doors of veterinarians, call veterinarians. And if you could get pet owners on the phone, talk to them about it. And it's a real problem. It's no one's fault, but it's sitting here in front of us now. So to me, the conversation shifts to what do we do about it? And we have problems with veterinary technicians or nurses equally so. And that's compounded by they're not paid enough. So there's compensation frustrations and they can't stay in the profession. So they cycle in and out. We don't attract enough people into vet tech programs because they don't see an economic future that's as attractive as it needs to be. And we underutilize them, which we all know. And the AVMA has done a good job and others have done a great job of making that point, but making the point and having practices change. So there's a lot of dynamics. And there's, what I get to, and we'll talk tonight about it, is what I call the 7 solutions. And they're all ones you can take.
Before we get there though, Mark, I do want to bring up just like, can we talk about the practice impact? Because I think Jennifer just posted in here as well, the idea that we also have people leaving the profession. So if you're indicating that this has been a slow and steady increase of pet ownership, we've had only a few colleges open over time. And now we have people leaving the profession because of COVID treatment, mental health, things of that nature that we really need to be looking at. What is the other impact having on the practice level with these shortages? And then I do want to go to the pet owner and the shelters, and then we'll go to solutions. Let's talk about the impact.
Be real quick with this one. Everybody understands one economic law, whatever your major was in college or not. It's called supply and demand. When supply is restricted and demand is up, prices go up. So the interesting fact is 2020, the COVID initial year, picture in March of 2020, who would have thought that 2020 would be the most prosperous year financially of veterinary practices? And frankly, the industry, with the exception mainly of boarding and kennels and that aspect of the pet sector, only to be surpassed by the second year of COVID, 2021. So on the one hand, in terms of impact on practices, Catherine, we've had the best 2 years in the history of this profession. And already the Fountain Report data shows that we're 4.7% up on last year on vet visits and revenues. Okay, so my point being, practices could look at this and say, we've had a hell of a good 2 years, but the price of those 2 years has been enormous emotionally on staff, as you mentioned. So practices, you have, I'm sure, baby boomers at the first shot they had to get out, because financially they were able to retire, they took it. Just like in the airlines, I saw Southwest Airlines say the very alarming thing yesterday, that their greatest safety concern for the summer is pilots, because they don't have enough. And pilots are retiring at a fast pace. Well, I think veterinary practices have been stressful and pressure cookers and people working long hours, and veterinarians aren't afraid of long hours. But when you have unhappy pet owners that are saying, I can't get in to see you, talk to me, whatever, it's been a tough environment. So it's been financially a good 2 years, but it's taken a toll.
So can we clarify one thing really quick though? Because I got a couple of private messages. So when you say that, and it's been tough, but financially the industry has grown, does that mean if we bring in, more veterinarians, what does that mean? The economics will go down, or will they go up? I just want to make sure I'm hearing correctly.
I'll take the bet every time, and there's not any amount of money that I wouldn't put on this bet. If we have more veterinarians and more vet techs and vet nurses, all practices will do is do better, because they'll deliver more service and better service to a demanding pet owner base that want more. I mean, if you tell me that you can't see an emergency clinic in 48 hours, if you could do that, if you could see them, just think about how that works. So frustrated pet owners right now, if I've been asked for 2 years since my book came out, what's the one thing that could kill Pet Nation? What would stop the growth of this otherwise amazing culture of pets in this country, including veterinary care for pets? One thing. Millennials aren't going to get that second dog if they can't get in to see a pet with their first dog. The emotional toll of saying, I can't see somebody, so why would we go get another puppy as much as I'd love another puppy? So I think we would, the tide would lift everybody if we have more. And that's been human healthcare. I'm sure every stage, the American Medical Association and the nurses and all argued, oh my God, we got to watch the numbers. And now in 2022, with all the professionals we have in human healthcare, the American Medical College Group says we need 135,000 next year. Okay, I mean, it's so you don't really catch up once people start to get what they want, which is immediate access to good care. And that's what we'd like to see, I think, in veterinary medicine.
Yeah, and I just want to pipe in just really good comments in the chat too. Dr. Gallo mentioned, the ERs. I mean, I'm a general practitioner too, and it's just horrifying, that sometimes the ERs are not open 24 hours anymore, or they,
Right.
close their doors when they are
Right.
full. It's just, it's horrifying that I can't get my patients seen by the specialist or the ER, and
Sure.
my clients are freaking out. So I totally understand where Dr. Gallo is coming from. And
Cheryl, there's two anecdotes there that drive that point home, and that's a so powerful point. I got a phone call from the Fox affiliate in Los Angeles. Hey, Mr. Cushing, whatever the person's name was, we'd like you to do a live interview, 2 or 3 minutes on the vet shortage. This is 3 months ago. I said, you're actually going to cover the veterinary shortage, just for a basic TV station in a market as big as LA? Yeah, we think it's serious, which was impressive to me. And they said, yeah, one of my best friends from West LA, probably had a decent amount of money. His dog died last week and tried for 48 hours, couldn't see a vet, couldn't get in anywhere. Period. I mean, that just turned a non-story for a general TV station, not for the, DVM 360 or the, one of the NABC publications, but for a Fox affiliate, turn it into a major story. And the problem we see in general practices is magnified in specialty and emergency hospitals right now. Magnified. And guess where that leaches into? Academia. None of you should think that the vet schools are immune from this. The salaries have gone up for specialists, right? And they have a tremendous difficulty competing with private practices that need specialists, right? And they can't get the faculty, they can't get the residents they need to meet their needs. So it's not as if it's just general practices or just specialty or just emergency. It's across the board, rural, suburban, urban.
Yeah.
That's insane. So, okay, we've pissed and moaned a little bit about the problem. Now let's talk about what the solutions are. Let's go there.
Kendall McGregor, one of my tremendous team members, and also Audrey Gillespie's on. I want to recognize Audrey. Kendall, who will be a great lawyer someday, but I've hijacked her for 2 years before she enters law school. She put together this simple roadmap, and I used this in the presentation I made 2 weeks ago at the Animal Care Expo. So that's why the topic is what these mean for shelters. But first of all, these aren't clever ideas, and I'm not a genius to come up with them, but I really tried to focus on what are 7 things that the industry or individual organizations could do right now to start the process of addressing the shortage. Some take a long time, some don't take as much time as all. So I thought it'd be helpful to just throw this up, despite Catherine's prohibition on any slides or graphics during Bridge Club meetings. In a moment of great tolerance, she allowed me to do this. So some are pretty obvious, but let's walk through them because each one has certain dimensions of challenges to it. And I know we have a lot of people probably on this Bridge Club tonight that are experts in some of these areas. So I welcome your comments. The first one, the first place to start, it's a pretty simple proposition, right? If you need more veterinarians, what do you have to do? You have to make more veterinarians. And the way you make veterinarians in our country and in any of the Western countries is, of course, through accredited vet programs, accredited by the Council on Education. So you need to increase class sizes. But that's a challenge. That's a tremendous challenge. And you think, well, how hard is that? And in lots of industries, in a lot of professions, including my own law, it isn't such a big challenge. You don't have to build much more to add law students. But if you've been to Michigan State, you've been to University of Illinois, you've been to any of the land grant schools, you've been to Penn, Cornell, you've seen the size of infrastructure. that they have, but they importantly, they have teaching hospitals on campus. And many of those schools were built at a time when the kind of relationship between large and food animal training and companion animal training was closer. It was more similar. Now we're at a stage where we know the percentage of students have become small animal vets, and we know the manner in which large animal veterinary medicine's been scaled up. I don't mean that we don't have shortages there, but the relative ratio of students changes. But teaching hospitals, if they're built for 80 students, if they're built for 90 students, and the average size of our 33 vet schools is under 100 class size, if they're built for a certain number, you can't just tell a dean of a land grant school, take another 30 students, even though I'm sure whatever state that dean is in, she could use more vets to graduate quickly and go help practices. But that's it. The class size restraint is a challenge, right? It's a serious challenge. So there's two ways to attack it. And I've been involved in these ways. So I'm not an expert, but I've got at least some experience. We now have, since Western, a number of schools that use the distributive model, which is clinical rotations are in 1 month rotations in practices and shelters and diagnostic labs around the country, not in a teaching hospital. Well, those are infinitely elastic. We have Ashley Russell, who's with Pet Folk, a new practice based in Carolina, but Ashley was more important probably than anybody in building Lincoln Memorial Vet School, and it's always been distributive like like Western. Lincoln Memorial, just to give you an example, uses about 85 practices to take their 125 students and provide a full year of rotations. You know how many practices they have that want to be rotations for LMU? Over 1,000. That's how elastic distributive models are. So one way you increase class sizes is you tell the land grants, you can't put 20 more people or 40 more people into your teaching hospital. I understand that, but you know what you could do? Take the 11 months of rotations and divide them up between teaching hospital time and distributive rotations. And if you want, do it in your own state. You could have the same number of people at any given time in your teaching hospital going through the different departments while you have another group out doing rotations and you switch them out. So that's feasible. And I'm hoping that some of the land grants will consider that. But the distributive models, like Lincoln Memorial, University of Arizona, which both I was involved in, but you've got Texas Tech now, Long Island, that do the same. Western, of course, has been since the 2020 time period. They want to grow. And I will tell you, as someone involved in accreditation, the default position of the accrediting body, not always the permanent position, but the default, if we're going to be honest here, the default position tends to be grow just a little bit, just a teeny bit, slow it down. Lincoln Memorial's had a class size increase pending since July of 2019. 2019. We're hoping to get a decision on that this summer in 2022. Even a lawyer can do that math. That's 3 years. And you can always say, well, we want to make sure that they're doing a good job. Well, then look at the data and see what the data shows. And it shows students getting multiple job offers, doing well. And my view, this is a debate I'm sure I would have with the COE about this, and I respect them, but I don't have to agree with them, is as follows. There's not a single vet school in this country right now that's not doing a good job. I'll say that again. There's not a single vet school not doing a good job. I believe the default position of the COE should be if a school and its leadership believe that they have the capacity to take more students, default towards letting them do that. And if you find problems, then you can work to solve it. So increased class sizes is where you would start. It would still take 3 to 4 years to get a veterinarian out the door, but that would be a start. New schools is obvious. And I think you're going to see a push for more schools to be opened, but they won't look like land grants. They won't look like A&M, which has been a client of mine, and a good friend, Eleanor Green, that you all know was dean there for so many years. They won't look like the big institutional land grants because they were built at a different era. They will look more functional. They will have a scaled down infrastructure, one of which is University of Arizona here, and I live in Arizona now. They're a top tier research university, 50,000 students, 2 medical schools, lots of teaching hospitals on the human side. They don't have a teaching hospital. They use a converted Sanofi lab that is in an industrial park to be the headquarters for the vet school. They use the herd that the ag department uses for U of A's undergraduate program and graduate programs for the animals that are used as part of the large animal training. Very functional. And I can tell you, it's a fraction of the cost to build that school. So you can open schools at a price tag that's much, much more affordable. There'll be plenty of people that say, I love the way I was trained at this university. That's the best way. Maybe it's the best or not, but you know what? It's not the only way. And I think those changes would make a difference. The third stop on this little road trip is a topic that we've discussed here in the Bridge Club. And I know there's critics of this, and that usually means it's an important idea, if not a brilliant idea, but at least it attracts people's thinking, is the need for mid-level professionals. You know how many years we've had physician assistants in America? 60. 3 generations. That means there could be a grandmother that was a PA, a son that was a PA, and a granddaughter that was a PA. That's 60 years to kind of learn from what that looks like, which is a shortened version of med school without the residencies, right? It was created in the war, and people will say, is it as good as an MD? Is it as much training? It's not as much training. Find me a doctor today that thinks that the healthcare system in this country could survive without PAs. And then there's nurse practitioners. And we've had those for at least 50 years. We don't have a mid-level professional in veterinary medicine. Institutionally, we don't. We have great vet techs, credential vet techs, RVTs, LVTs, CVTs. Some states don't license, but I wish they all did. But the point is, yes, we have tremendous vet techs, but we don't have anything in between a vet tech and a DVM. And I know there are members of the vet tech and nursing community that view this as a threat, but it hasn't been the case. As PAs and nurse practitioners became part of the healthcare system, nursing compensation only went up. If you had mid-level professionals that had been themselves, which the LMU model requires you to be a credentialed vet tech, if they had been vet techs, do you think they might best understand how to utilize 100% of the skills of a vet tech, which isn't the case in most practices today, and understand the need to give them the authority and the respect? And this morning, you probably all saw this. If you get the online updates to today's veterinary business, the survey just came out. Is either 1,000 or 2,000 pet owners. Really depressing. What was the survey result? 3 out of 4 American pet owners, 3 out of 4 believe a credentialed vet tech cleans cages and holds pets. That is so offensive. I hesitated to bring it up tonight because I know there's super talented vet techs watching this Bridge Club program. But I tell you what, let's just deal with reality. So much needs to happen there. And I think a mid-level professional is one way to lift up credentialed vet techs and certainly not hold them back. The fourth stop is one we've talked about since 2018 and the Banfield Summit, where Ken Yagi and Heather Pendergast and Kara Burns and others did a great job on behalf of NAVTA in presenting the data that showed basically 50% of vet tech skills that are board certified by the AAVSB's VTNE exam aren't utilized. And I don't know that those numbers have gone up appreciably since then. And what does that do to a profession when you don't get to use? As I tell you, it's like telling a right-handed baseball pitcher, you've got to throw left-handed every other game. No, why would I do that? Why can't I do what I do best? And I think there's 2 things that have to happen. Part of it's get practices to improve. That's hard to do. If people are locked into the way they use their vet techs, maybe they'll never change. I don't know. But the other thing we can do is we need to look at practice acts again. And everybody goes, oh my God, don't open up practice acts. That's going to be a bloodbath. It's not a bloodbath. It's just a professional debate in an organized way about what privileges we assign to vet techs. And my strong sense is we underutilize them. And we don't let them do as much as they're trained to do and certainly experienced to do. So there's that option. So those first 4 would have a huge impact. If all of them were put into play, we wouldn't have this topic in 3 years or 5 years in the Bridge Club. Telemedicine, let me just say, we've had enough debate about that. Okay, I'm not here to have a telemedicine debate, But obviously, there are a lot of veterinarians. There's a lot of vet techs that are home, want to be home, want to work from home for various reasons. And put aside the VCPR debate, which we've had plenty of, but if you've got an existing VCPR, use a team and use the platform companies that know how to do telemedicine and make that available. Because to somebody who can't get in to see a vet every time, find me a person that can't get an appointment that wouldn't appreciate talking on the phone live on FaceTime or Zoom to a vet tech or a doctor about the pet's problem or question. I don't think you can find one, honestly. Sure, if they need, surgery, if it's an oncology issue, it's something different. But for the most part, those aren't the questions. We're nearing the end, then I'll stop and we'll take questions. Technology, what's that? When you don't have enough labor, industry and other sectors, including human healthcare, has always figured out ways to leverage technology to do things that are the more mundane tasks that you don't need to have people tied up doing. Wall Street Journal had a great piece on that 2 weeks ago in human healthcare, and I think the same applies here. So I wish we had more investment in technology as it pertains to how vet practices operate, including on the back end, the radiology side, which is very exciting, but we haven't spent as much money. How do you do that? Well, we have a university in Great Britain, University of Leeds. Now, Great Britain has a culture of pets that's about as close to the US as you get. US, Canada, Great Britain. I don't think we love our pets any more than people do in Manchester or Liverpool. And they have lots of vets and they use vets very intelligently. And Leeds University is a leading vet AI or leading artificial intelligence university. The British government and the university put money into funding veterinary AI research. And they even started a company there that's doing quite well called Vet AI. And you might take a look at their website. It's JOII, Joy. You have to do a clever spelling of these things these days, right? So JOII. Feel free to take a look at it. And it's the company that's based in Leeds University, but very exciting, doing large scale work. And I think you'll be impressed at how they're using AI technology developed by Leeds, perfected every day by experience with the veterinarians and the vet nurses there. And I could see that it's part of a solution, and it's beyond my expertise to get much deeper in that, but we have models to look at. And finally, the last one, which is a topic that a lot of people in the profession, including AVMA and state VMAs, I think take very seriously, which is, again, not by intent, but it's turned out that more than medicine, nursing, dentistry, law, architecture, it's harder for veterinarians, and in many cases, veterinary technicians, to move across state lines and be licensed than those other professions. And honestly, it's not because veterinarians care more about quality than medicine does, or lawyers and nurses and dentists do. And I debate anybody about that. They all care. But they're kind of the rules in place. In some cases, 10 years you have to practice consecutively to go into a certain state, Hawaii, and not have to take the NAVLE. No reason for that. I mean, if you've taken and passed the NAVLE, you don't have a criminal record, you don't have any licensing issue with your state board, or you've taken the VT&E and you don't have any licensing issue, there was no reason why states couldn't join Texas, Florida, a total of 19 states, pretty good number, don't have any prior service requirements. And you think about it, well, we let vet students graduate, quote, with no prior service and come into a state passing the NAVLE. Why do we tell someone who she's practiced for 3 years in Pennsylvania, why can't she move into Oregon because she doesn't have 5 years of practice, otherwise retake the NAVLE? There ain't a professional in the country that wants to retake the test in their profession, whether it's mine, lawyers, doctors, the LCME structure, and all the above. So those are 7. I'm talking fast because we don't have 2 hours, but all of those are realistic.
And you've caused the chat to go quite crazy.
Yeah.
So
I'm sure.
I am actually going to stop sharing my screen really quick here so that we can get back to the main part.
So have at me. Come on, give me a shot.
Go,
So
Cheryl, you go first.
So I want to make a comment, then a question. So one comment that you were just talking about reciprocity, I was speaking with a neonatologist, a human doctor, friend of mine, who was telling me he has licenses in like 9 different states. And I said to him, so there isn't reciprocity in human medicine either? And he said, nope, not usually. So that's going to be a tough hill to climb. But There was one question that stood out to me, so I was going to ask you that. Dr. Gallo said, to base the idea that the vet schools are doing a good job, are you speaking specifically about training their vet students, or are you speaking of their vet school hospitals where they're training their students?
I think vet schools are doing a good job across the board inside their teaching hospitals in their didactic program.
Because
And
Jennifer
sure.
Gallo was, her comment is that that there's a lot of people coming out of veterinary school without some of the basic training. So it's a little scary.
Cheryl, it is. And that's a fair criticism. And I've been aligned and associated with the distributive model, and I'm a proponent of it. And human medicine does that too now, just so you understand. My wife chairs anatomy at Mayo Clinic's medical school here in Scottsdale. Okay. We went to a birthday party of a faculty member last Saturday. That's not important, but I happened to be there with 6 first-year students. And fortunately, they think the world of my wife. So they were telling Natalie what a great job she did teaching in their least favorite subject, gross anatomy. And they started in the fall, right? And I asked them, when do you start into your rotations, your clinical rotations? You know when they start? Oh, next January. In other words, a year and a half after they put the didactic into 18 months and get them out for 2.5 years to do clinical. And they do it inside Mayo and outside Mayo institutions. And Mayo is just one example I'm giving you. And I do think that the distributive model has done a great job of showing that, like with human medicine, a student can learn a hell of a lot, not looking over the shoulder of an intern doing surgery or a resident doing surgery, but hands-on. That's why, very shocking story, but Ashley Russell knows this quite well. At Lincoln Memorial in their first year class, which had the smallest number of applicants, probably the least academically prepared based on GRE and science GPA they'll ever have, because they didn't have much time to pull the first class in. Highest starting salaries. Why do they have the highest starting salaries? It's not because the water is good in the Cumberland Gap, Tennessee. Simple reason. Good training, of course, but all schools do good training. They went into practices for a month, and by the 2nd or 3rd week, the practice owner was saying, Ashley, would you consider living in Louisville? You ever thought about living here? Because we would like to offer you a position. They saw them practice medicine, and it was an audition, which is what human medicine does in that last year of rotations, right? Everybody's on a rotation to get residencies. And you go try to show your best to show the hospital at Case Reserve or Cleveland Clinic or Mayo or, University of Michigan or Michigan State. I'm ready to be a good resident. And we could do more of that. So I think teaching hospitals do a great job. What I think, if I were dean today of a land grant school, I would increase my class size and I would add about 2 months to 3 months of distributive rotations, keep the same numbers inside the teaching hospital at any given time. And I think I'd be really contributing to my state's, veterinary future. So long answer, but I think that's one path that I'd love to see.
Well, so let's dive into the pay piece here, because your first piece that you have on your, as an option is increased class size. But right now it's very well known that the debt is higher, pay is lower. So getting more recruits to want to come into veterinary medicine. So how can, and then I got to follow up on that. I'm gonna poke some holes in you. So how is that? So that was a good question that came to us, is like,
it's a great question. And you know what, we can thank Jim Lloyd for this data too, because everybody knows VMCAS, right? VMCAS is the system that you use of the AAVMC, and everybody applies to vet schools in the US through the VMCAS. And they track this. And Jim showed that, first of all, vet student applications are increasing each year, but there are 2,000 minimum. Let me count the number. We graduate 3,000 plus American vet students from US schools every year. We graduate 3 grand a year. There are 2,000 applicants that do not get into US vet schools that match the GRE and academic profile of the bottom quarter that do get in. So now don't jump on me and say, well, that's the bottom quarter, because you know what? Once you get into vet school, it doesn't matter if you're the top of if you're the best student or the worst student. If you got in, you deserve your seat and you have a chance to earn licensure and take the NAVLE and become a vet. There were 2,000 American kids that qualify for an American veterinary school experience and get turned down. And I'm going to bet you most of those 2,000, they're not doing it for the money. They're doing it, and 80% are women that probably fell in love with raising horses or, you know, small animals as children and kept that dream alive and saw a profession that welcomed women and didn't punish women for joining it. And the point is, fill up those 2,000 and then tell me we don't have enough qualified students. But I also can tell you the starting salaries are going up. As we all know, signing bonuses are becoming reality. So even what was unattractive about vet school has begun to change. And so I think that world's different now, Catherine. We won't have a problem getting good students to fill the seats.
Okay, so here we go.
That's happening for maybe for veterinary students, you know, signing bonus, but for the vet techs and the vet nurses, that's not happening, and that needs to happen.
Yeah,
so,
and I'm
how
gonna
do we help that?
I spoke today to a great group, the UVSA, which are the distributors and manufacturers. They had their convention here, and it's a group I've represented for a lot of years. And I was asked that question that very bluntly, just as you did, Cheryl, which I appreciate. And honestly, the solution to the vet tech and vet nursing issue is in the laps of veterinarians, period. And I'm not going to assign that to any political force or any other factor. It's not the AVMA's problem. They didn't create it. It's not VMA's. It's not the colleges. Veterinarians have to look at it and say, if you're losing your vet techs, if you can't keep them, then look in the mirror. And if you've had the best 2 years you've ever had, sorry if you don't like this, and I got pretty big vet clients that have heard me say this, pay them more, make it more attractive, create career ladders that are inspiring, and that'll attract a bigger pool. So, you know, to me, that's the easiest of all questions, because the answer is there's one answer: step up. And you'll find practices doing that I think don't have the retention issues that others do have. Yeah,
the frustration is getting the veterinarians to do it. Like what can we do?
Well, you know, and everybody's trying, you know, the AVMA's trying, state VMAs are trying, you know, the big practices have tried. We've been to all the same seminars at NAVTA, and Kirk is here, and Kirk's been a great leader there. But you have to have somebody willing to do it. And it's all about, yeah, I know what you used to pay, but that doesn't work. $35,000 doesn't work in the 2022 US economy. Okay, let's just get it out there. Okay, that ain't enough.
But then, Mark, if we go back to your solutions, the majority of your solutions land on the shoulders of technicians, not on veterinarians. And I think that's one of the things that is also coming out in this is, you know, we've got in here, you know, question came in about, okay, we're already overworked as it is, underpaid, and also we're going to do telemedicine. No, I'm done. I'm overwhelmed.
Okay.
I don't have time to get another degree, and I'm not sure that degree is worthy of what I am doing on a day-to-day basis. So there's some solutions in here, I think, that are challenging from the perspective of, you know,
Oh, go ahead. No. You've poked me. That's good. You kind of punched me. I'm a little bit. I feel it in the jaw, but they're all next to each other, and I'm not saying pick the best one. Of the 7 I laid out, I want all 7 pursued. You know, we have to catch up to human medicine and the way they've realized you have to have different levels of professions, pay them right. You have to change the teaching models. You have to use telemedicine. Every state fought telemedicine. And I'm not here to debate telemedicine, but it's a tool. So for God's sake, use it if people want it. And a vet tech, I mean, this is one thing you may not all know. If you talk to the platform telemedicine companies, right? The companies that what they do every morning is they get up and they do telemedicine. They outsource it. You know what they'll tell you? They don't have a hiring problem. Dirty little secret that I didn't know, and I spent a lot of time around telemedicine. I have talked systematically to the providers. You know what they've told me? We got all the applications we can possibly handle from vet techs, nurses, and veterinarians that want to do telemedicine. They want to work from home. They're forced to work from home. They may not have choices. So I think you can line these up next to each other, Catherine, and they don't, you know, use the phrase, put on the shoulders of vet techs. What I'd like to put on their shoulders, you know, are small buckets that have more compensation in them and make them, feel better and live more comfortably than they're able to. And, it's a team approach, but each of the pieces are, what are we trying to do at the end of the day? Wouldn't we like to see every single pet owner have access to healthcare? Yes. Wouldn't we like to see that? Does it matter if all the healthcare is delivered by a vet? No. Should a veterinarian be involved in some fashion in all of it? Yes. But should we take all the tools possible? Why not? Could we learn from human medicine? I don't know. Why not? Seems to me we could. So I'm just talking about layering solutions. Each one can be debated, but let's test them. And by the way, let's do pilots. Let's see how it works. And I don't think we have as much disagreement there as you might suspect, but
I don't think we do either. And note, there is no singular solution to any one problem. There's always multiple ways to come in. So we are at 7:45. I do want you to talk about the impact to shelters, because that was something you started out and we didn't address. And people, please keep your questions coming in. And sorry, I hope you're not too sore there. It's all good, because it's about a dialogue of really bringing forward what the problem is and the solutions.
Catherine, if you'll keep the chat and organize it, and Audrey Gillespie's on the phone and Kendall that work with me, I'll answer every question. I mean, if 10 of them are the same, I'll answer it once, but every question that's not answered or not addressed in the chat, I'll answer in the next couple of days. So shelters, here's the problem with shelters. And it has surprised me in my practice, because I've been more associated with, I represent groups like PetSmart and Royal Canin and Banfield, Mars and so forth, more corporate type entities. And last year was a year where every month I had a humane society or shelter group or organization reach out and want to talk about the shortage and so forth. So what's the problem with shelters? If starting salaries, thank goodness, are getting to be 100,000 and more and signing bonus for veterinarians, do you think a shelter can even get in that game? What are they going to say? Well, we'll offer you 60. It's really hard work. You won't have a lot of help. And after 4 years, you'll be about $160,000 behind paying off your debt. But otherwise, it's a great gig. Sorry to be, seem like a smart aleck, but that's the point. They can't compete financially. So the shelters have wanted to talk about the mid-level professional, Catherine, from the day the idea came out of the Veterinary Innovation Council and LMU started talking about it. Maddie's fund is providing, everybody should hear this, $250,000 in scholarships for vet techs and shelters that want to go to the LMU program, which is online. You don't have to move. You don't have to live in East Tennessee. You can stay where you are. $250,000 to cover the costs of what's about a $20,000 tuition covering 3 semesters. So shelters' problem is this. They cannot get in the game, Catherine, of competing for veterinarians unless it's someone that only wants to work in a shelter. And Godspeed to those people, but there aren't enough of them. So the challenge is they look at this mid-level professional as they're going to take veterinary anatomy, physiology, and pharmacology. They're going to know some medical things that give them a chance to provide some leadership that we don't have access to vets to do it. If you don't have a vet in your clinic, don't give me the argument that a veterinarian would somehow know more and be better than a vet tech. I don't want to hear that argument. It's not a choice. So I think shelters are in peril. What are their alternatives if they can't hire somebody? You've got to get veterinarians to donate time. What's the last thing a veterinarian has today in America? Time to donate, right?
Yeah, that used to be me. I used to go every single week, once or twice a week, and I just ended up not having the time after a while.
It's interesting. I'm working with one of my new clients that I never would have anticipated having a chance to work with is American Pets Alive or Austin Pets Alive, the big shelter in Austin. And we're launching a program that's modeled after, close your ears, law firms. So what do law firms do in big cities like where Catherine lives in Chicago? All the big law firms, they all pay starting salaries that are crazy numbers, but they pay almost exactly the same salary. So you come out of law school and you have 5 offers and they all offer you the same thing. And they all are going to wine and dine you, but they're going to pay you the same amount of money. You know what they compete with? You'll never guess. What? Believe it or not, lawyers go to law school wanting to do good, just like veterinarians go to vet school to want to do good. So what do they compete with? The most generous pro bono service opportunities. Like you come work for Cravath Swain, or you come work for Skadden Arps, big firms, and we'll let you have a month a year. You can go do low income project law that you want to do. We'll pay you your salary. You won't have to do anything back at the firm. 11 months of the year on us, 1 month, you get to go do your thing. So why not go to the practices that can afford it, that are scrambling to find vets, and say, you want a tool to recruit? Tell your veterinarian you want to work in a shelter, humane society, name the place, for a month or 2 weeks, whatever it might be. We'll pay your salary while you do it. Sure, it causes a glitch in the system at the practice while you're gone, but get over it. And what if you took 12 of these from one practice and put them in one shelter? That adds up to, a full-time vet, doesn't it? One per month. So there are things you can do, but the shelters are in that state now. They have to get those kind of solutions, Catherine, or they're just not in the game financially to compete.
Well, and I will tell you, Ashley just gave a great example of the idea of the virtual positions, and that people want those positions. And so she gave a great, that they had in 1 week over 900 applicants, because people were looking forward to it. So I think, your solutions are well stated. And I guess the only thing before we do a final toast is, you have indicated 3 to 5 years on many of these. Obviously, telemedicine is right now, technology is emerging right now. How quickly, I don't mean for you to look into your crystal ball, but how quickly will we potentially, if these are implemented, start to see a little bit of a benefit from more veterinarians entering into?
If you look at that little roadmap of 7, if we upgrade the usage of vet techs, which is again up to veterinarians, that's immediate impact. And that means taking the talents and saying, in an exam room before the veterinarian comes into the room, give them the freedom to work it up, not to make the decision, not to write the prescription, but to work it up in a way that their skill level allows them to do so. And so when the vet comes in, instead of 12 minutes or 15 minutes, maybe it's 6 to 8 minutes, and just take that time and add it up in a day and how many more pets you see. So that one has an immediate impact. The LMU program is a 3-semester. The first graduates will not come out until December of 23. And not everybody will go straight through, but the point is, so that's kind of near term, right? Telemedicine is immediate, and that doesn't involve any debate or any politics about the VCPR. Just take existing practices where you have a VCPR and use your talent that you have to treat, and not treat, but to help your clients answer questions, set things up, hand it off to a vet as needed, but take advantage of it. That's what human medicine does. There's no risk anymore there. That the threat of risk is hyperbole, honestly. 50 years ago, you could have said, we don't know what's going to happen, but we've watched it happen. And human medicine's not cratered because they use telemedicine. You just use it when you have to. Those 3 are quick. Then class sizes, schools can, and the COE, the creditors can decide within a 6-month time frame. Yes, they've given some approvals, so they know how to do that. The new school thing is a more systemic, longer term idea.
I feel like if we sneeze, it's going to already be December. So like the fact is, if before we realize it, time does move, and hopefully we can get some relief here soon for the practices themselves. I can't thank Mark enough. This is a tough topic because it is hitting many pain points. It's hitting the pain points for the technicians. It's hitting the pain points for the practices, the practice managers, the veterinarians themselves. We have people leaving due to mental health issues as well, strain, retirement. We didn't even talk about the sheer numbers of veterinarians that are now retiring, and the pet owners. And now you've also mentioned the shelters and the impact to them. So before we go, Mark has made the commitment. I have gotten all of your names down, that I will make sure that you get all of his answers. We will send that separately. You all will get a copy of this video, but Mark, it is time to do our final toast. So if you have anything left in your glass, I made sure I kept a little for us to do our closing toast. So are you ready, dear sir?
I am, and this is not the toast you expect, but I want to toast everybody that participated, whom I hope are devoted to one idea, which is the value of open, good, vigorous debate. Whatever you think of the answers, whatever you think of the motivations, I welcome the fact that Catherine provides a forum, and I never have done bridge clubs and I don't even assume that a majority of the people may or may not agree with my recommendations, but honestly, I don't care, not because I'm indifferent, because I really truly believe in good, vigorous speech in the profession, and doors shouldn't be shut, and you shouldn't be shamed for your views any more than you should be for your ethnicity and your preferences of any sort. So I think if veterinary medicine's comfortable talking about solutions and saying, we'll take any on the table, they may not be the right ones, but we'll look at them, we'll be better off. So here's to all of you for putting up with the likes of me, but I do hope there's ideas here that you can find interesting and find your own way to promote. So cheers.
Cheers, everybody. I love it. And by the way, we do have Mark coming back to talk about how we are going to deal with the breeding situation with breeders and how we're going to do that later. So please check out our calendar, because that's a spicy, spicy one. And again, what I love is that Mark says no question is off limits. So come to that one as well. You all have a great, great evening. Mark, thank you, thank you, thank you again from the Bridge Club. We adore you, and all have a great evening. And may the 4th
May the 4th be with you.
Good
Good night, guys.
night.